Good evening, good evening, good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode number 726. The pre-show, the magical part of this program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say very outrageous things. This is for December 18th, a show that should have been done on December 16th. The reason we are tardy, we had severe thunderstorms and tornadoes down here where I happened to be Monday night. So we were basically preempted by the weather. So we're a couple of days late. We apologize for that, but better late than never. And FYI, we are producing next week's show tomorrow night because I will be on vacation next week. Typically every year I take Christmas week off. I don't get a lot of time off, but looking forward to that because I've not had a day off in a while here. So let me very quickly get a couple of things done here. You know what we got to do here? We got to get the embed code down. So let's do that. And we got to invite our regulars on here. Let's see. Zoom would like to change your preferences. Okay. Fine. All right, let's get the regulars on here. We'll see who can make it tonight. It's always a wild card whenever we do the show not on Monday night. And I forgot my stinking little AirPods. I have those things with me every day, but the one night I forgot them. We're doing a show, but I'll have them tomorrow night. So excuse the wire dangling from my ear. A little old school here. So let's do an invite. And we're going to invite them by email and get this going here. Got a good bit to talk about tonight. So let's bring in everybody. And hopefully some folks will be able to join us. And if nothing else, I can go on a rant for 2 hours. You know that. Let's see here. Aubrey and Dr. John and Troy and Nate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that's everybody. All right. So they have now been invited. I just saw an email from Bill Murray asking me to listen to his test. So let's listen.
That's my new audio bridge and the settings in Amadeus. James, if you'll listen to see if it looks correct, maybe open it up in Amadeus and see if the tracks look.
That sounds good. It's like Bill's got him a new audio interface. And I actually have a new audio interface. And I've actually got a different computer this week. For those tech weenies in the crowd here, I got a new computer a few weeks ago, one of these new MacBook Pro 16-inch models, and kept having a random reboot and kernel panic. And the kernel panic said, bad magic, exclamation point. And so I thought, well, maybe it's an operating system thing, and the .2 upgrade came out, didn't fix it. So let the geniuses take a look at it, and they said, yeah, it's hardware. So they just swapped it out and gave me a brand new one, and we have not had one bad magic error. Bill, I listened to your audio file just a second ago, and it sounds great. And now he can't hear a word I'm saying. Bill has that look on his face like he has gas. And whenever he has that look on his face, that's not good. The two veins on his neck are going out like that.
Yeah, my blood pressure is like 280 over 93,000.
That's not good.
Well.
But the audio sounds great.
Well, I know. Look here.
Yeah. PR20.
I have a new audio bridge. I solved my headphones not working. You know, it's really scary when you go to the internet and it says, go to the terminal and type sudo pkill audio core.
Sudo, baby. When you type in sudo, that's when it gets good.
It's like, this could be a $3,000 Mac laptop down the drain, or either the Russians now live inside it, one or the other. But
yeah.
it worked on the first try.
There you go.
A bunch of
Terminal magic,
people, you know,
baby.
'cause you always go whatever somebody says, and then you look at all the responses. It's probably a bunch of Russian trolls too. But it was like, absolutely fix my problem. Worked the first time. Blah blah blah. I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm going in. Boom. It worked. So now my headphones work.
Okay.
All right, so you got to listen to that audio file and tell me if it's acceptable for radio.
I did. You were not hearing me when we first got on here, but I said I've listened to it and it sounds fine. So,
Okay, good. All right, I got to invite our guest.
we're good.
Aubrey.
Hi guys, how are you?
Hey, Aubrey.
Thanks for doing a Wednesday night special. We had, and again, for those that missed the beginning here, we had a severe weather situation where I happened to be Monday night during our normal production time. So we were not able to do the shoe because I was on the big green wall in that room, which is what they pay me to do.
And I was up there in your neck of the woods, Aubrey.
Oh, were you? And I did not get a phone call.
Well, I didn't think you'd drive 120 miles to.
That's a little out of the way.
Probably so. More than your average commute. All right, I've invited the guest.
So, Bill, you missed the whole severe weather deal. Wow.
I
Thought you
missed
were here.
every bit of it. I have a hotel in Alexandria, Louisiana.
Ooh.
We have to tell them, when there's going to be bad weather in the morning. So at 8 o'clock, I will not be able to monitor this weather today because I am in meetings from, 10 a.m. till 10 p.m. And so I put Scott Martin in charge of it. And, he knows who to call and whatever. And that tornado missed that hotel by less than a mile.
Oh, man.
And so when he about, I don't know, maybe it was 9:45, said, they need to go into alert mode. And then he came back and said, now they need to go into tornado warning mode. And then he said, there's a big tornado on the ground moving toward the hotel. I just get sick at my stomach because that's 2 hotels in Louisiana that either got hit or nearly got hit this year by large tornadoes.
Well, and you have to think that the majority of people in hotels are, from out of town, not familiar with the area, kind of just unsure of where to go. Maybe they don't even know what county that they're in.
You nailed all the problems that are there, Aubrey. And that's what we attack and have for 35 years, because that's one of the things you got to tell them what county they're in.
Mm-hmm.
You got to tell them, where to get their information.
Talk about not being able to find yourself on a map.
And there were 90 people in the hotel that morning that had to come down, and go into the tornado safe place. And if they hadn't been in the rain and hail, I'm certain they would have seen the tornado. I'm certain they would have if they'd been on the other side of it. They were on the north side in the bear's cage. And they measured a 60-mile-per-hour wind gust at the airport right there, which is just a half-mile away. Matt.
Good evening.
There we go. All right, James, we can have a show now.
All right. So we
Got
can't
all kinds
get
of folks here.
we got a better crowd on Wednesday night than we do on Monday night here. Wow.
It's church night. This is like the
So-
WeatherBrains Tabernacle.
So we're gonna,
Brother James.
yeah. I got a good sermon here. We'll start in about 60 seconds.
I want you to be proud of me for doing all this extra crap tonight. If I can just string a shock mount by tomorrow, James, I'm back.
String a
with
shock
audio.
mount. That is a show title, but we can't use it because we're not on the air yet.
Why do I always do that? I never get to be the show title.
Just say
Cam always
something
gets
out.
to be the show title.
Say something outrageous during the show, and we'll make it the show title. Now, and again, for those watching on the stream here, we're going to do 2 shows back to back. We're doing tonight and tomorrow night. So,
Ooh.
and I think tomorrow night is an early start, right, Bill?
Yeah, I won't get to be on it because of Birmingham Boys Choir concert, but
So yeah,
Yeah,
tomorrow
that's
night,
large.
early start, which will be, I think, 7 Central, 8 Eastern. Kim, is that right?
that's right.
You know what? I hadn't thought that it was an early start, but I'm glad you mentioned it since tomorrow I'm running it. So
Yeah.
I'll make that work.
I know that our guests said they could do 7, so.
Yeah, 7 Central, 8 Eastern, I think, is the calendar time here for that. So
Do you know how to send the invite, Kim, out once you get in the show?
For Zoom, I don't.
You just down at the bottom, there's an invite button. If you
Oh,
click
there we go.
that, you'll get, a multiple sets of options to.
Okay.
One of them
So
is
you
just copy the invitation. It just copies it to your clipboard, and then you just stick it in an email and send it to them.
And
Oh,
welcome to
hi.
our television viewers. We're doing a little,
Television.
we're on the air late this week because of severe weather Monday. We're all extremely tied up here. So let's get this sucker started here. We're going to record channel number 1, record channel number 2, and here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Uh-oh.
This is WeatherBrains, episode number 726, the weekly show that's all about weather. This is the pre-Christmas edition. We're doing this on the 18th of December. And, we were supposed to do the show on the 16th of December, but we did not do this show because we had weather. We were preempted by weather, of all things. Sometimes that happens. Imagine that. But for those that don't know, we are in our late fall, early winter severe weather season down here in Dixie Alley, and we had a pretty rough go of it Monday night. We had
You always say that like the judge on My Cousin Vinny.
Dixie Alley. Because I'm from Butler County, Alabama, down there in the deep South. But it was a rough night. We'll talk about it later during the weather roundup. We had 9 confirmed tornadoes in the state. We had 2 fatalities. We had several injuries. We had considerable damage. And, the bad thing about this early winter tornado season here is the fact that it comes right before Christmas. Just an absolutely
on the anniversary of the Tuscaloosa tornado, James.
Yeah. And again, we had a tornado on the 16th of December in 2000. In fact, multiple tornadoes that day. So it's nothing new or unusual. But again, we'll talk about that during the weather roundup. But I'm so delighted to see Aubrey with us. Aubrey, you warm our hearts when you're on the show.
Oh, you're too kind, James. You're too kind.
No, I'm not. You were the greatest. So, so will you be working next week, or do you get any time off here?
No,
Christmas?
so we're still short-staffed. So it's still just the 2 of us. So I will be in full force next week. So just another week. But thankfully, we have limited shows on Christmas Day. So.
Okay, well, hopefully you get some time off for New Year's or something. I mean, goodness.
I'm hoping maybe by February or March, to be honest. I'm really hoping that we can get someone in here and train so I can go to Mississippi State in March for their spring conference. And
how could that already be coming around again?
Speaking of, have we even mentioned the fact that we have another panelist as a keynote?
Kim. Oh, Kim.
Yeah.
Paging Kim. You're coming to Stark Vegas.
We are the source of speakers.
Stark Vegas.
We're going to get you. We're going to get you a Stark Vegas shirt before you get out of there. It's one of my happy places, and always love being back on campus. And Kim, you're going to have a great time. You will be treated. Now, Aubrey, won't you be treated well?
Of course. Not only are the students wonderful, the faculty is great, the attendees are wonderful, and the information is always great. You always learn something, and it's just a great event, a very homey event.
Awesome. So, in fact, I saw Dr. Cloco McLean last Friday in Alabama, of all places.
Sure did.
At the integrated warning team. Troy, you okay over there?
That's me.
I'm doing fine. I think I found out I was impeached a few minutes ago, but apparently that was the president, not me. So I feel better about that. It scared me a second,
Yeah. I got to blow my buzzer with a political free zone here.
I know. Scared me for a second, though.
Yeah, but no, and I hated it because they told me to save December 6th for that big IWT meeting. So all year long, I had December the 6th saved. And then at the last minute, they moved it to December 13th because they couldn't get that venue where they wanted. So I had a school I could not move. So I did a school visit way up north of Birmingham, then drove to this thing way south of Birmingham and only stayed there for a couple of hours. But Kim, thank you for coming to our great state. And everybody said that your content was just superb. So thank you.
Thank you. It was wonderful to be invited. And it's been something that's been planned or in the works of planning for over a year. So, the Birmingham office has just had a lot going on, as you all know. Very well. Man, am I glad that we were able to sneak in. And then, really it felt like sneaking in, because then a couple days later, what happens? You have the exact kind of scenario that we were talking about, and figuring out how to deal with, and just another very hard day for the state of Alabama. So, and for other parts of the South as well. So it was great to be there, and obviously work yet to do.
And I don't want to, we could do a whole show on this, but the 2 fatalities were in a mobile home, manufactured home, whatever, prefab, whatever we're supposed to call these things. And that is an increasingly big issue that we all need to figure out. We all need to figure this out, because this is just getting insane. A precious couple, they were killed, and their 7-year-old child is in critical condition at Children's Hospital here. And we've got some work to do. But anyway, Kim, thank you for being here in the state, and thank you for being here tonight. Troy, missed you last week. Welcome back, buddy. How you doing?
I'm good. Gave a final tonight or today from 2 to 5 p.m. and kind of got grades on that computer over there. So I'm kind of looking at that. We got to get grades cranked out, final grades before Friday at 10 a.m. So got that. So just still kind of staying busy and looking forward to having the semester over with.
So what class are you teaching, Troy?
It's the big class. It's just the non-major. It's weather and climate, and intro class, the upper division atmospheric hazards class. We took care of that earlier in the week. But UT, for some reason, it's just the calendar. But I mean, there actually were people still taking finals from 7 to 10 tonight after our finals. So it's gotten really late. It really gotten kind of close to Christmas. But I'm just glad it's over with.
Now, you didn't teach underwater basket weaving, did you? Is that class offered by you, Troy?
No, that's a summer school class.
Yeah, I took that one in college, and it was the greatest. So Bill, let's bring in our guests here. Let's get this show started.
Yeah, Nate asked me, said, I thought we already had Matt on recently. We did, but Matt's in a different role tonight. He's a meteorologist, Delta Airlines, but he's also a captain in the Air Force National Guard. And so we thought we'd bring him on tonight and talk about, the role of weather in the military. So Matt, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks very much. Glad I didn't screw up too much on the first time. I get a second time around.
Well, there you go. So you did such a good job. We had you back. So
believe me, Matt, if anyone would screw up, it'd be the 5 of us, or me. It would never be up here again. Matt, you have nothing to worry about.
Exactly. We haven't gotten fired after 725.
Yeah.
This goes okay. I always love flying through Atlanta, at 8:30 this morning, and I always hear a new term. And I know, your weather, but you probably pay a lot of attention. I know Troy does, and a lot of people on the show pay attention. But I heard a new term in the Atlanta air traffic control about overtake. I think you have an overtake of 79. I don't think I'd ever heard that. It was approach controller. And I guess he meant that a plane was flying too fast and overtaking another plane in front of it. Does anybody have any comments on that?
That's probably a good guess. Depending on what the conditions are at the airport, they've got to have certain spacing between all the planes. If it's a VFR day, you can have shorter spacing because the tower can see the planes. And obviously, if there's low ceilings, the spacing has to get further out because they can't see the plane. So it was probably something like that.
Well, I heard 2 other funny things. There was a wrench on a taxiway, and that created a lot of consternation. And I guess there were 3 things, because there was a large flock of birds, and the birds were playing hide and go seek around.
Damn, Bill, I'm going to stay away from you when you fly. It sounds like all kinds of problems.
I know. And then some Delta pilot butt dialed the ground for like 5 minutes, and we listened to the entire conversation.
Shut up.
I'm
You're making this up.
No, I promise. I promise. And you could hear the controller, because you could hear the conversation in the cockpit clearly. And occasionally you'd hear this little, Delta 1 of those things, please. Trying to get over the guy. And pretty soon, I got tired of listening to that. So I switched over to the tower. And a minute or 2 later, he's doing it on the tower frequent. I thought it was Friday the 13th or a full moon in Atlanta. So.
Okay, mark a note here. I do want to travel with Bill after all. Okay,
I think you would find it.
Sounds like an adventure.
It does, exactly, Matt.
And then I heard something interesting at National this morning. They gave the pilot the choice on approach to land on either runway runway 1 or runway 33. And I thought that was that seems a little unusual. At that point, I think they would already kind of be planning, wouldn't you? By the time they were talking to the approach controller, I don't know. We need
they should have, unless it was just a very slow day for them.
Yeah,
it was not slow in the terminal. I can tell you that. You can tell the Christmas travel is already hitting even at 4:30 this morning. It was interesting. So you're a captain in the Air Force National Guard, right?
That's correct.
Talk about your role, what you do in that regard.
Yeah. So, a lot of people, I think, also maybe get a little confused with what is the National Guard, what are the reserves, what's active duty. So I'm in the Air Force National Guard. There's the Army National Guard and the Air Force National Guard. And our first priority in the National Guard is actually defending the homeland, so defending the United States. Luckily, we haven't been attacked for some time. So the main things that the National Guard would be called in to do on an active duty type order for the United States would be to help with the disaster relief, like when wildfires come. I've been called down to Florida many times for hurricane relief, and when hurricanes are marching their way towards the Gulf Coast. Could be for riot control. I haven't had to use that in a while, so that's good. But even I sent some of my airmen up to Washington, D.C. When President Trump was sworn in for the inauguration. They needed a lot of National Guard just to do a security up around the Capitol. So the National Guard defends the homeland. And after September 11th, we were not just kind of like in a reserve mentality where, hey, kind of National Guard is the last guys we're going to call if we need to send people overseas. That's what your active duty is for. And then the reserves backfills the active duty. But after September 11th, because we're in so many theaters all across the world, the National Guard became more like a ready reserve or operational reserve where we're used all the time. So once a month, I train with a group of 19 people in my unit. I'm the commander of the unit, the 159th Weather Flight, and we are down in Camp Blanding, Florida. Most of you don't know where that is. It's about 45 minutes north of Gainesville, Florida. So if you got any UF lands, they know where that is. But down there, we train and mentor the people who are in our unit, the airmen, so that when there is a time where we need to deploy, whether it's here in the United States for hurricane support, thankfully hurricane season's over, or to go overseas to support some kind of contingency operation, our guys are ready to go out the door. Matter of fact, we actually had 4 people to get deployed and are already back home to us, thankfully. We sent 2 to Guam to do a mission out there with F-15s. Which was a support mission and a kind of a posturing mission against China. And then we sent 2 overseas to Al Dhafra, which is in the United Arab Emirates, close to the Persian Gulf, Arabian Gulf area. And they were also doing some posturing against Iran, but also supporting contingency operations really all across the Middle East, from Syria to Saudi Arabia and Kuwait.
So when you say posturing, I think of some animal that's out there protecting its territory. I guess that's what it is, huh?
We're imagine us as a lion, and we are defending our friends and defending the things that matter to us.
Well, there you go. I like that term, posturing. So as an International Guards person, do you have a choice when you're deployed, or is it you sign that right away when you take that role?
Yeah. So I guess the big difference in active duty is, when you are on active duty, you get active duty orders and you can kind of go anywhere around the world. It's where the military needs you. In the National Guard, you can choose what state that you join and the unit that you join. And then that unit, the way that we function is that we support many different Army and Air Force units across the United States. So if that unit deploys, we deploy in support of that mission. We're part of the operations support function within the fighter wings and within the Army units.
So James, what's our air tanker, and you probably know this, man, what's our air tanker refueling unit out here at the Birmingham airport that's part of the Alabama National Guard? What's its numbers and description?
I don't know the number, but they do a lot out there. They're very active.
The KC-135s, yeah, the refuelers. I think well, I won't say most, but at least half of the refuelers are actually in the reserves, and not the guard. But I don't know the exact number. I'd have to look into it.
So those men and women are trained to go right into battle if we were forced into a situation.
Yeah, basically the order has come down, from the president, from Congress, that we need to be ready to go within a 72-hour notice, and that is something bad is happening, and we need to go. They drop orders, and you have to leave your loved ones. You have to leave your job. For those that are in school, you have to leave school. You take an oath, and that is where you did take the oath. You signed the orders that you were going to serve, and at any time you could be called away and kind of whisked anywhere around the world where the United States needs you.
So the folks that are in your unit, what are their titles, roles? Are they all weather airmen, weather air women? Are there different roles in that group besides you as the commander, obviously? Yeah,
so I'm as the commander, I am the head honcho, the boss man, I guess, for our unit, and I've got some administrative functions, but I'm also a weather officer, so I can still go out and support commanders and be able to give them weather information. But for the other folks in my unit, most of them are enlisted, and we just kind of consider them weather airmen. Sometimes we call them battlefield weather airmen because we really could send them out where bullets are flying. I pray that we never have to do that, but they could be sent anywhere, in any type of situation, behind a desk or living out of a tent or the back of a Humvee and doing some limited data forecasting for some troops that are on the ground. Their backgrounds. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. The backgrounds, though, are pretty varied. So to give you an example, I'm the only meteorologist in the civilian world and weather officer in my unit. Everybody else has very different walks of life. One of my enlisted airmen is a lawyer. One of my enlisted airmen is a couple of them are in college right now, going to school full time. One's in nursing school, and one's going to school to actually be a meteorologist. I've got a couple of people in the unit that have different backgrounds in engineering. It really just kind of the full gambit, which is great, right? We always talk about diversity, and we really, in our small unit, have just this massive amount of diversity and life experiences to bring together to kind of help us build on each other and just, let us have a great team.
So we need to establish a rule of the road. We never really talk about this on the show, but the guest always has the right of way when you come to an intersection. So if one of us talks over you, Matt, you automatically have the right of way.
Boom.
All the panelists, and then it's James. James is right down there, right, at the end. So it's
man,
it's the guests, it's Kim and Aubrey, and then it's James. So that's
so then for Mr. Span, I'll give you this. So one of my colleagues, I told her I was going to give her a shout out. Her name's Emily Wilson. She's a big fan of yours, and she showed me at work today the video you posted of the snow moving to New York City, that time lapse.
Yeah.
That was
squall.
That was beautiful. Oh,
incredible.
That looked
incredible.
awesome.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
So now you're talking about all these varied backgrounds, these diverse folks, Matt. Are they all coming out of college as meteorologists? Or are they getting their training in the military for weather?
That's a great question. So in the National Guard or the reserves or active duty, the military, for the enlisted side of the house, they will provide the training. All that's done at Keesler Air Force Base, which is in Mississippi, next to Biloxi. And it's one of the more intensive training in all of the military. As far as the length of time, it actually rivals jet pilots. So what we do is we send our folks to Keesler for 11 months, and they learn collegiate level dynamics, atmospheric physics, all the way down to your nuts and bolts and just your analysis. So they are given almost a college level degree in education when it comes to meteorology. And then after that 11 months, we get them back at the unit, and we send them away where they do on-the-job training for 4 months. And then after that, they come back to our unit and we certify them on the skills that they've been learning and practicing in day-to-day operations.
So Troy, it seems like to me this is an underrated way to become a meteorologist. I know James, our friend Dr. Keith Blackwell, did it 100 years ago when he was in Mobile. He went to the Air Force, but I had heard that training was that concentrated. James, that just tells us this job is as hard as we thought it was, right?
Yeah.
No, it's very hard. Very hard. Yeah.
So Troy, do you see this as is this off the radar of undergraduate type?
No, I mean, there are a lot of great meteorologists out there that got their training through the military. Like Matt said, I mean, it's, I would never, I have friends that, retired military that do radio weathercasting now, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for them. It's just one way to kind of look at it. I mean, either way, like Matt pointed out, and I think James kind of seconded as well. If you think that the military is the easy way to get meteorology, you're probably sadly mistaken.
You're so wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So
It's not for the faint of heart. I'll say that.
Well, nothing too, Matt, that, I mean, like you say, you go and spend this year and you go in and you do that. And then all of a sudden you end up somewhere, here, go practice that. Not somewhere necessarily in the United States. Take this and go practice it somewhere overseas. So, that's baptism by fire in a sense.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, I think that to me is one of the fascinating parts of what you've described. Are you often working then in a really data sparse environment? Can you tell us a little bit about, what are the differences between working domestically and trying to provide support for forecasting and information about the atmosphere, and internationally? I feel like we take so much for granted in this country, and I'm not sure what all you can even count on as being available to you out there.
So that's a really excellent question, and kind of a two-part question. So for domestically, we're doing operations, we're supporting missions for different reasons, right? So if we're doing hurricane support, we've got a ton of resources that we can lean on, right? The National Hurricane Center, plus all of our gazillion of models and different interpretations of that model data. If we are going, for instance, I went to Fort Hood for 2 weeks in February earlier this year to do an operation. And even in that environment, we're like, we don't have a ton of data where we are at Fort Hood, but you look at, to the north and to the west and to the east and to the south, we've got data. Not to mention, we've got so many models that focus on the United States. So we've got a plethora of data. And since we have, GO 16 and GO 17 up, not only do we just have the model data, now we can verify all that data in virtually real time. When we're overseas, it's a very different environment. So we have to rely on other satellites. People don't think about the geosynchronous satellites that are over the other parts of the world. For instance, my guys that were in Guam had to depend on the Himawari satellite. And the Himawari satellite has a lot of great functions, and its functionality has improved quite a bit over the last 5-6 years. But using it is still a little different than, say, using GOES. And how you get to that information is also a little tricky as well, because the military has different firewalls with the systems that we use. We can't always go to the same websites that we can do here in the United States. But when I was in Kuwait in 2015, we were supporting operations in Iraq and Syria. And you can probably guess how many weather balloons are sent up in Iraq and Syria. None. Breaking news there. So, we had satellite data to depend on, and that satellite data was 30 to 35 minutes old. And if you've ever had to forecast in the desert, it can be pretty tricky. And when you get to the season where there might be a thunderstorm once every 2 weeks, getting that forecast right is super important. And so it was almost more reliable to go outside in the 120-degree heat and dust and look towards the horizon to see if you could see the anvil or the top of some CB that's building, then look at the satellite data, because by the time that thunderstorm was blowing up, you would just now start to see a speck on satellite. So operating in a data sparse environment, it challenges your mind, and it makes you rethink how you forecast. You have to use a lot of persistence, So you've got to keep very good records, and you got to be able to go back and look at climo. A lot of times we look at weather and we think about real time, what's happening right now, but the past can tell us a lot about what's going to happen tomorrow as well. So getting into climo and understanding what that means from wind direction and wind speed during certain months to, when's the best time for thunderstorms, or, when's the best time for inversions to set up, to look at temperature and wind speeds a couple of thousand feet up for helicopter pilots. It's very challenging, and we can train kind of to it here when we're in the United States and in our unit, but there's nothing like that baptism by fire, by getting out there and really figuring out what you're made of.
Matt, just a reminder, because I don't think people fully appreciate this, but I always encourage my students, especially with any history majors that we have here at the University of Texas, to go back and look at how weather has affected battle and conflicts in this world. If you want to see some interesting reading about how weather has changed the outcome of history, there's some very interesting stuff out there. And Matt, as you know, because we've talked before on this program, I know nothing the hell what I'm talking about half the time, but
show title. That's a show title.
Thank you, James. Yeah, right. But Matt, there is a group, and I'm close with this group because they actually are in charge of the ASOS here in Austin, or have it housed at the 209th Weather Flight at the Texas Army National Guard at Camp Mabry here in town. And they actually house the ASOS there, and it's located there. And what I hear, and I'm not going to mention any names of any of the people down there, but part of their responsibility, Matt, is to be able to help the military in times of where they've got to move quickly, to establish weather stations, to establish places where they can parachute troops in if they need to. And I'm told in a relatively short period of time with parachutes, they can put stuff on the ground that would surprise probably some meteorologists. They could, be able to establish weather stations basically, and have weather operations so that you could help to assist in this. And if you look at this history with meteorology and battle, you can go back to periods of time. The WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, I think tries to get all the people to play fair. But on the other hand, if your country's being attacked, what's the first button you probably want to cut? I probably want to cut off my military data, weather data leaving the country. If I'm in charge of a country and I've got the U.S. moving in on me, why give them my weather data?
Absolutely.
And that's a strategic military move. Now, from what I understand, Matt, for the United States, it really doesn't make much difference. The United States can take care of that, I've been told, as far as setting up shop pretty quick if they have to. But I just want people to understand how important this is, and I don't believe people at home appreciate that as much as I think they think, okay, Lord forbid that we ever have to go to war. But at the same time, this is an important part of that, Matt, isn't it?
Having weather on your side, history has told us it can literally turn the tides of a war, right? World War II, a couple of examples there, not just the storming the beaches of Normandy, but one city and 250,000 people being wiped out over another, right? So weather played a factor in the cities that we bombed. Weather played a factor in the day that we decided to storm the beaches.
Didn't we discover the jet stream during World War II also? One of the first high-level bombing runs, didn't they run into it? Is that a true statement at that point? I mean,
I won't say that it's not a true statement. I mean, aviation certainly got a huge boost, in leading up to the war, but especially in the 40s. And it was actually the one of the quickest ways to die was to be inside of an airplane. I think something like 80% of the planes got shot out of the sky during World War II. I mean, it was a very dangerous time to be in them. But having to fly high to get away from the ground forces and the ground to air artillery that was shooting up at them, they had to get high. I don't know, one of the big things, even though Benjamin Franklin had documented this as far as weather patterns moving over space and time, but across Europe, being able to note that something impacting England, Great Britain, and then starting to impact France. And, we could see these patterns start to develop. And we use the term cold front, warm front, occluded front. We use those terms all the time. But the reason we even call them fronts is because of military fronts, the fronts that were established across Europe. So, even whether that how we use it today has some ties to the military.
Well, Matt, I mean, you've got to imagine that when the 40s and World War II, to be flying in an airplane and be dealing with 100-knot headwind, you're going to learn real quickly this is not the surface anymore where we had primarily, this, and by the way, this could have a bad effect on the outcome of, if you're flying into 100-knot. I mean, it was more or less something that we had to find out really, really quick. And look at the radiosondes, the radiosondes in the early. Why was that? By necessity, I assume that the atmosphere was not this one-dimensional thing. It was a multi-dimensional thing that we had to figure out really pretty quickly.
And that's the fun thing to teach these kids, like when we do our weather balloon every year, because you can go outside and look up at the sky and it'd be a beautiful day, and that not be the day that you need to launch the balloon because the winds at 300 millibars or 120 knots, and it's going to end up in eastern Tennessee or up there by Aubrey somewhere.
Yeah.
So and that's a really neat thing for them to grasp, is that it could look blue sky and still that wind can be howling up there. It took us 10 extra minutes to get to Atlanta today, Matt, from DCA on a Delta 737.
Bill, you've had such a bad day, man.
I know. I'm not complaining. It was a great travel day today. It was interesting. It was comical, and I got home in one piece with my luggage. I saw a great comment in the National Airport. It had a Bob Hope quote in the little historic thing. He said, because it was the history of National Airport. And it was like, "I love flying," was the quote by Bob Hope. "My luggage has been to more places than I have." I thought that was hilarious. But, I got a Delta app that tells me my luggage just got loaded on the plane. I don't have to worry about it.
Yep.
That's a metric that we keep track of.
I bet you do.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah. Troy, to your point about being able to deploy weather equipment, whether sensitive or not sensitive, I would say it's all sensitive, right? Because if we can exploit the environment better than our adversary, then we have one leg up on them. So we do train to that. We've got a couple of different systems that we can deploy. Some are really big and you need more than one person to carry them. Some are much smaller. Some it's just a person. I don't know if y'all are familiar with what a Kestrel is. Kestrel, little handheld, unit, handheld device, but it's got a little anemometer on it. It's got a temperature and dew point sensor. It's got a pressure sensor, and as long as you've got a compass, and you know which way is north, you can start taking observations. So we, as a rule of thumb, we want to be able to, when we get to a location, begin to set up that weather station within an hour. Within an hour, we are starting to gather data and put together data. And that limited data forecasting ability, which has to come from practice before you just start it, is really important. We hear a lot of the old sayings, right, from the farmers who were really some of the best meteorologists because they had to know when it was going to rain, when they needed to plant their seed. They look up at the sky and they'd see cirrus rolling in, and they'd say, well, okay, maybe 1 to 2 days we might have some rain coming in, depending on the season. Or red sky at night, sailor's delight, right? All these little rhymes or rhythmics that they used to have, though they had them for a reason, because they do work for the most part. So when we were overseas, when we're in some kind of data-sparse environment, because some of the training that we do here in the United States is in very data-sparse places. Most military bases are not like in the nice parts of the United States. And I say that the term lightly. I just mean we're not anywhere close to society.
I was going to say, there's a lot of bases here in Oklahoma.
We're not in a large residential area, we'll say, with all the amenities. We're out there, and we may not have access to electricity, or if we do have access to electricity, because of the simulation of the exercise, maybe we don't have internet. Maybe the Russians or the Chinese or the Koreans are simulated as taking down our internet. So we have to know to be able to communicate with each other And from the weather aspect of it, I feel like a lot of pressure gets put on us to be able to perform in those situations, because they need to know, commander needs to know, is this mission a go or a no-go?
Yeah.
And when it comes down to, hey, we've got the personnel, the equipment's good, what's the weather going to be? What kind of threshold are we going to be at? Hopefully it's never a life or death type of situation, but we've got to be able to give them an answer. There's no waffling around.
That's the way we are every day on the blog, James. Some rogue operation is attacking us. You never know when you come in the morning whether we're going to even be on the air.
So, Matt, I have to ask, the last time you were on the show, I was so amazed by your ability to grasp the three-dimensional nature of the atmosphere. And I think, working in aviation, it's a natural thing. You have to work with all three dimensions of the atmosphere more than probably anybody on the planet. I'm so interested in, what you're talking about, deploying to these more data sparse areas. Does it to some degree almost enthrall you when you are put into a situation where it's data sparse, where you get to use this knowledge you have about how the atmosphere works in all three dimensions? You have to sort of pick out clues, where clouds actually are sort of tracers of perhaps rising motion, and they're a marker also of the history, right? The source region that the clouds came from and how they've been modified over time. And you sort of have to be a detective in that scenario. Do you ever feel that way, that yes, it's a challenge, but it also sounds like it could be a good bit of fun under even though high pressure?
Yeah, luckily, I mean, y'all can tell that I'm not passionate about anything, right? So, but I am very passionate about being able to forecast and really kind of like matching your wits against nature, right? And so, yes, detective, I think, is the right word to use. You've got to figure out kind of the motion of the ocean, right? The atmosphere is a dynamic. It's a dynamic environment, and it acts like a water. So there's currents, and we can't see these currents. We can try to find them on satellites. Where's the ridge? Where's the trough? Is there a jet screaming into an area? Or, big bubble, no trouble. We sitting under a massive high, like we did in the Middle East, where just days and days and days of just constant nothingness. In Kuwait, there were several rules of thumb where when we were forecasting for Iraq, when we take off with drones, so unmanned aircraft, there's certain landing and takeoff minimums. And then also when they get up in the air, they got to be able to see what's going on down below. So if we're going to go to an area that had, could be under some kind of dust storm, right? We would need to know or forecast, hopefully correctly, which way the winds were going to be coming from and how fast they were going to be, because depending on with the Tigris and Euphrates River and the parts that have dried up because of the damming out there, there's new source regions of dust. Well, some dust is like moon dust. You step on it and it's that poof kind of stuff. There's some dust that's kind of more like sand, I guess is the better term for it, where it's more granular and it takes more wind to pick that up. But then once the wind picks it up, it goes everywhere and stays suspended for some time. So knowing the direction of the wind, the source regions of the dust, or if we're talking about the next storm system where the trough's coming from, where those cirrus are coming from, all that stuff is super important, because you've got to put that 3D and really 4D when you think about time, because it's changing every second. You got to be able to put that puzzle together. And then in an hour, you still need to be able to put it together. And then when your relief comes in, you got to put it together for them. And they got to put it together for 12 hours and give it back to you. So it's this constant detective, let me use anything that I can, reliable or not, to be able to build a better picture. I love it though.
Yeah, that is remarkable that you're able to do that. And thinking about the boot camp, the course that you described, that 11 months or so of training that people go through to be in your unit. The meteorological curriculum, when you're taught as an undergrad, so much of what you're taught is somewhat abstract equations. We don't learn any of this practical stuff at all in undergrad. And, it took me. I had to go
yourself, right, Troy?
I learned more about forecasting when Facebook opened up to adults, not just us college kids, but people like Chuck Doswell joined Facebook and I friended him. And he'd talk about, what he was seeing in patterns in the atmosphere and things like this. I learned more about forecasting through social media in some sense than I did through my classwork. It strikes me that in that class, or those series of courses that you undertake, you might be teaching more things like pattern recognition. Can you comment on what is that you're focusing on? It seems like such a short time to pack in all the math and physics when there's so much of this practical knowledge you could also be baking in. What does that look like?
So for the 11-month course, it is hyper intensive. I mean, anybody who makes it through that, you got it. They're smart people, right? So a test that you have to take when you join the military, it's called the ASVAB test. It's a placement test, but they look at your critical thinking skills, your math skills, your learning, interpretation, vocabulary. They look at all that. So the weather career field, there's a threshold, and it's one of the higher thresholds in the military. So you got to be able to put information together in a compact way. So with this school for 11 months, they teach them the basics, just the very raw basics, and then they take them through this kind of stair-step course where they're just building on information and building on information. My guys learn the hydrostatic equation, right? And you think, gosh, why do I need to learn that in the military? Well, I would probably ask the same thing. Why do I need to know that with my bachelor's degree, right? Because I'm not pulling out the hydrostatic equation or the geostrophic wind and saying, this is exactly where that interaction's taking place.
But is that Matt? Is that 11 months? And now this may be exactly where Kim's coming from, but is it more operational, I guess?
So it starts out as theory, and then it becomes operational. So one of the things they have to do, something that I wish I did more of in school, was to be given upper air charts, to be given slices of the atmosphere, surface, 700, 500, 300 millibars, and do the upper air analysis, right? Find the jet max, figure out where there's any kind of temperature advection, right? Is there cold air advection, warm air advection in the upper levels of the atmosphere? And the lower levels of the atmosphere, is there moisture advection? Where is the main trough? Where are these little mini troughs? Where is the jet streak? And so they go through the theory, and then it's just a lot of pouring into these maps. And, now here's why it matters, right? Here's what's happening today. They analyze it, and then they're able to look at that data and say, oh, wow, hey, there's this huge thunderstorms complex that developed across the Great Plains, and we saw this low tracking across the Rockies, and we expected a low-level jet to develop. And, they're able to put it all together. And then the 4 months after the 11-month course, where they're doing that on-the-job training, that's where they're able to do that day-to-day forecasting in a single location and kind of learn some of the rules of that area. But they're able to put it together, piecemeal it together, and develop a forecast product that's good. They're not guessing, right? They're not weather guessers. They're actually strong forecasters.
So do these weather airmen tend to stay in the military longer than the average military person, or is it about the same as everybody else, man?
So the great thing about the military that I've learned is that people join for different reasons. Everybody, when you wear a uniform, if you look what's over your heart on the left side of your chest, it is the unit, the branch of service that you join. Mine says United States Air Force. Your name tape's on your right side. So we always say, what's over your heart is the same for everybody. But the reason that you join can be different. So some people join because of the benefits of the military. So I've got some of my airmen that are great airmen that join because of that college benefit, helping to pay for tuition. And so everybody has a term to serve, and then they can always sign up to re-enlist for longer. And so that's kind of one of my jobs as a leader, to be able to mentor my folks, give them the training that they need, give them the opportunities to serve if they want to deploy or not want to deploy, and want to keep them engaged in the unit. So keeping people in is kind of more on me. But we just had one of our airmen retire after 20 years, which is awesome to think that he served that long, and he's an Iraq war veteran, so he's done some great stuff.
I thought Troy was going to go down some of the the more headline grabbing special operations that have happened. And I know weather had to play a role in those. We may or may not can talk about them, but I'm listening to the book about Jimmy Carter's presidency right now, Stuart Eisenstadt's book. And I didn't realize when I downloaded it from Audible that it was 38 hours long. Jeez. Should look for the abridged version, but I have to think that now you can talk about what happened when they tried to rescue the hostages, and weather played a role in that. Do you have any knowledge or any anecdotal stories from that, or anybody else can add in too? Because I'm waiting to get to that part of the book.
I don't, not from that situation. I've got other examples, I guess, but not specifically about that.
Anything that you can share that you won't have to kill us after you tell us?
Right.
Break our legs.
All right. Well, first off, let me tell you that the weather guy doesn't do a lot of killing. The weather guy does not break a lot of legs. Or if we're doing either one of those things, it's a bad day. Okay.
Yeah.
But we are trained, and we carry weapons. We fire on our weapons every year. I had to send folks up into Iraq to work at the bases that we had, operations going out of, and I had some of my guys who were doing. Let's see. So there was an operation. Gosh, I can't even say too much. So there was an operation. It was secretive. There was an injury in the Middle East. And my guys were part of the cell working with the special operators. And when they had to send a medevac in, my guys were giving the medevac team that forecast. So it wasn't me personally, but it was my team. I was super proud of my guys because, when it comes time to, hey, somebody's shot and we need a forecast, we need it now. And that medevac, they've got to get out within 5 minutes. So they've got to be able to have all the information. The weather plays a small part in that, but they need that because the commander has to authorize them to go. Weather's got to meet certain criteria.
That's just huge. Troy, anything to share in that? I mean, you were talking about some cool things. Any other weather anecdotes from history that
Pardon me.
that come to mind?
No, I mean, but just and I'm fixing to start coughing. Let me get back to you in a second.
Well, actually, I have a follow-up question on just what you were talking about, the medevac and helicopters. For our listening audience, I think it's so useful to draw a comparison. Compare what you guys were dealing with in that situation versus what people in domestic situations where there's a helicopter flying, perhaps just from a hospital out to another hospital. We do sort of medevacs here as well. What kinds of resources do they have to rely on that just simply didn't exist in your sphere when you were deployed? What stuff do we again take for granted?
Radar. All right, so radar is a huge thing. We had a mobile radar unit that was down at one of the bases in Kuwait, and the radars here in the United States, the 88s, they reach 120 nautical miles, and then you can put it on a little bit further and get up to 240 nautical miles. The radars that we use, they're emitting radiation, so the amount of energy that they're utilizing only allows them to get out to, I think, like 30 or 40 nautical miles. So depending on where that is, even though Kuwait's a very small country, we can only see so far. So again, your eyes being able to see an anvil, coming up over the horizon, it's like, oh man, like there's something there, Now my guys that were up in Iraq, they had no radar. So keeping tabs on the clouds that were pouring in, so one of the stations was up in Erbil, which is in northeast Iraq. There's mountains up there. So that even brings another dynamic into it. The elevation changes. How are the weather patterns impacting areas, say in central Iraq, which is kind of like a plain, like a high plain, and then the mountains in northeast Iraq, that butt up against Iran. Were they going to have snow showers? Were they going to have sleet? In December, it does sleet. It does snow up there. And so when I was there in December, sleet fell. Ice pellets fell. And so that usually shuts down operations because helicopters can't de-ice, right? So that's a big deal. Radar, I say, is one of the biggest biggest downfalls of being overseas, because we just we take it for granted. I can find it on my phone in 5 seconds.
Right.
There's a lot of things we take for granted. And I guess you're not getting shot at here in the United States when you're going from hospital to hospital.
Mhm.
And, there were times where you've got to be able to fly lights out, right? So there's a lot of things to think about. We have to, when we're doing military operations, there's important things like, what's the phase of the moon? When does the moon rise? When does the moon set? What is, believe it or not, there's several different types of twilight. Figuring out the angle of the sun relative to the Earth. Is it astronomical twilight? Is it civilian twilight? Is it nautical twilight? Because different amount of sun that we measure in millilux, is coming over the horizon, and that can impact night vision goggles. We may want to be going someplace where we don't want to have shadows, so we can't have more than maybe 7 or 8% of the moon showing, because any more than that's going to put a shadow from the helicopters or the drones onto the ground. So there's so many facets to think about.
This is why we had you back again, man. So just this is exactly why we had you back again. That Kim raised the question about medevac, and I'm just full of stories from Atlanta today. But it seemed like the controllers treated the medevac plane with more deference and a little more, I don't know if it's respect, but just a little more urgency. And maybe talk to that for a second. Is that a true assessment from just what I heard today on the radio?
So, right. So in the civilian world, let's say that there's an emergency that's declared on an aircraft, they get number one priority. Even, unless some plane is really low on fuel because a dispatcher or pilot made a mistake and didn't put enough fuel on, they're basically moved to priority one to get them on the ground, and they'll have medics and EMTs waiting for them at the gate. So they are given the highest level of urgency anytime a medical emergency is declared.
Matt, I know that in the last couple of weeks, we had a medevac crew, I think outside of Anchorage, that perished. It was actually southwest of Anchorage. They were called. It was a very marginal situation. There's a lot of question now about whether they had, if it was the best choice to have taken that mission. It was a private company out there in Anchorage, and unfortunately, they did not make it. The crash site was found, but you think about that. We see a lot of stories. It shows the dedication, I think, of the men and women that are involved in that sort of thing around this country, because they really are out there. They want to help people, but weather can be a real, and it's one of those situations, when does the benefit, we tell law enforcement, all the time, do what you can do, but we're no good if you fail to be there, be cautious. But that weather's got to be so important for those people, as it is in civil aviation for that matter. And we have too many people dying in this country in Cessnas and thunderstorms as well. The FAA will even tell you that. They're trying to educate pilots more. But I think with the medevac stuff, and to see that across this country, and especially in Alaska, because I watch that pretty close, it says a lot for the men and women that are willing to do that, how much they're willing to go for and how much they're willing to risk to go in and save people.
Absolutely. Dedication and sacrifice, I guess, probably the two words that come to mind, because they may be tired, they may have had a full day, but overseas, I didn't meet one of those pilots who would say, man, I'm not the right guy for the job. If one of their buddies or sister service was hurt, the guys are just lining up like, I'm in, even when the weather is in the hole, and it's not looking good. Those are still the same guys who say, put me in, coach, like, let's do this.
You were mentioning data in places like Kuwait. Are their weather services advanced at all? Is that information important? Is it even something that the military, the United States military, even factors in? Are there sharing arrangements there? How does that work?
So no, there's no sharing of information amongst well, I won't say allies, but
Yeah, it's hard to tell who's on whose side sometimes.
yeah, yes, sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. So if we had a joint operation with them, we would express to them what our thoughts were on the weather. But that wouldn't even come from me. That'd even be like a higher echelon than me. I wouldn't be a part of that discussion. But we kind of have it broken down as far as what is kind of like priority information, what's secondary, what's tertiary, and the in-country weather information is kind of tertiary, because they don't, I'm not saying they don't have the same standards that, say, maybe the United States does, but it comes down to accountability. In the United States, we've got the National Weather Service, right? The National Weather Service, gets its funding from NOAA, which gets its funding from Congress. So there is some accountability there, to be able to provide good forecasts to the point of life-saving information. Over there, they don't have the same threats. They don't have the same thresholds. They don't have the same busy airports, most places, that we have here in the United States. So they may not have that standard that we're looking for in the military, because like I was talking about earlier with Kim, if the wind is out of the northeast instead of the northeast, that 20 degrees may not be anything to them. That's within their kind of cone of error, if you will, cone of uncertainty. But for me, that's the difference in dust moving into a place and being down to a quarter-mile visibility, or them being VFR and you can see 25 miles away.
Well, I got to think that here in the United States, Matt and James and Bill and Kim, we're incredibly spoiled. I think Matt said it best. When you can pull up WeatherScope and look at the weather radar out at Anderson Air Force Base in Guam, at their Doppler out there, we're pretty spoiled with that. And Kim, I know you're maybe a little closer to this because you've visited with these people before, but the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, these groups, part of their job is to try to foster the sharing of weather data globally, to deal with all the different agencies around the world. And especially now, Matt, where we are with internet in this country, don't assume everyone's got internet around the world. And that's one thing I understand WMO has to, they say, well, why don't you put this information out on the internet? And there are certain countries that say, why would we want to do that? And I've got to give the WMO credit. They kind of act like the weather playground cops, in a sense.
Title.
It's true.
And as Matt has pointed out, if you've got Matt and his colleagues knocking down the door into my country, I'm going to be talking to my people saying, well, we just cut off all this weather data. I don't want to be sharing with Matt and all them. They're knocking our door down. Boy,
can you even imagine what it has to be like? Yeah. All the constant geopolitical conflict and trying to navigate that, and data sharing. I'm sure that plays a role, Matt. That might be something that you're familiar with. I can imagine it is a factor.
It is. Weather knowledge is a resource, right? Every government, every private and public organization, they live to exploit data, right? Whether it's Facebook is exploiting data, but you were able to learn weather forecasting, which is great. Or
nothing about that degree from Purdue or anything.
weather degree from Facebook.
Weather degree from Facebook.
We're helpful.
Got a few of those running around.
But yeah, being able to control any data in and out of a country is going to be power, because you're taking information away from people. But yeah, not having the weather on the ground, especially, let's say we're going to go to somebody else's runway, and if we don't have information about what the visibility is on that runway, or is there a crosswind on that runway, all that's really important information. If they take that from us, they make the job a lot harder.
Well, I think it's interesting in talking to students, and again, keep in mind non-majors here. We don't offer a degree in meteorology at the University of Texas, but to talk to students and to make them try to understand why the World Meteorological Organization oversees the surface, basically the surface observation programs around the world. Because why? Because the United pilot flying out of Houston tonight needs to know that observation in Frankfurt, Germany is as good as the observation from Houston. He's got a tube full of people that he's flying over there this evening. And I think students they don't really appreciate it, especially when you don't have kids that are majoring in meteorology. I think the WMO does some pretty cool stuff. And I imagine they stay, as Kim would sort of say, I think they stay pretty busy.
Yeah, that's absolutely, it has to be just a crazy thing to try to keep up with and to manage. But really wonderful perspective to offer those students. Absolutely, Troy.
Well, Matt, anything else you want to make sure we talk about before James starts to transition us into some recorded segments here? You're welcome to stay to the end of the show, of course. And
Matt, please say something, Matt. I'm afraid we'll get back to Bill's travels today again, and I just want to.
Oh yeah, I got to
save us.
I'm just kidding, Bill. You know that.
I'll tell you something on a little bit of a side note. So one of my colleagues at Delta sent out a collection of old METARs, which are your observations, your hourly and a special observations. Sent out kind of a compiled list over the years of some really odd language in the remarks section of OBS, because if you don't know, if you're unfamiliar with how you write an observation, there's a certain way you've got to encode it. Thanks to the WMO, the observations all across the world are encoded the same way, so anybody can read them. But at the end, you've got RMK, and then you got a space, and so you can write whatever you want in there. There was some really interesting stuff, like two moose on the runway.
Yeah.
There was one that said family of polar bears playing.
Yeah.
Then there were some really creepy ones where somebody was like monologuing a novel, but at the end of a METAR. So I'm not exactly sure how that worked out, but anyway,
I'm going to tell you, you've got nothing on James and myself, because I remember, James, come on, go with me, please. The surface aviation code, the SA codes, back when you had service level A teletypes that were 60 words a minute, we thought they were so quick. And you had the surface aviation, what we call the SAs, back in the day, dimly visible.
You live for those hourly essays, man. And when you saw some of those cool remarks, it was like, ooh, this is awesome.
Nuggets of information.
I'm gonna have to get this. I got to see this thing that Matt has, because I've saved some observations, some of the file cabinets over here, where I remember one from Pine Bluff, Arkansas, a number of years ago when they were all manual OBS, and a tornado hit the airport, and they managed to get an OB out. Tornado approaching the airport, we're evacuating. Stuff like that. I mean,
Just
really
makes
amazing.
The hair stand up on the back of your neck.
Yep.
Well, I can't believe you guys
take
missed
some of those. I was going to say, I feel like I should take some of those vintage reports and like compile them in like a frame or something like that, and give them as Christmas gifts.
Excellent. There you
Put
go.
them into your artwork,
right?
There you go.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Whip something up.
So you guys missed the biggest question of all for Matt. I can't believe nobody asked this question.
James just
Matt,
sits around and waits to see if we ask
here's the question of the night.
question.
How do you in the military become a chemtrail operator?
Run, Matt! Run!
Special training.
I'm not going to answer that question, but I will.
It really does
Wise
exist,
decision,
James.
Matt.
I think we just confirmed it right there.
No. I can neither confirm nor deny chemtrails.
So in all seriousness, is there been any weather modification experiments done by the military in the last 25 years that we don't know about, or we do know about? We maybe haven't heard about.
Tell you that, James.
Well, I'm trying. You got to ask.
He always asks a hard question.
I've got a clearance. I mean, my clearance is not that high, James.
We'll be able to drop by the Taco Bell in East Atlanta and see Matt in a couple of weeks.
No, where I'm going, you won't find me.
Okay.
Now, they've done some weather modifications, trials and failures, but that I think we've got to go back like 50 odd years for that. I know they tried to modify a developing tropical cyclone off the coast of the Carolinas. That didn't work out so well.
No.
Hit Savannah.
Yep. Yeah.
What was that storm headed toward Alabama? Never mind.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's going down the
Sharpie's
tube.
out.
And we got to talk about Neil Jacobs, and I see Kim has that as her pick of the week, so we will defer that discussion until we get to picks of the week here. So, real quick, Aubrey, I don't know if you have time for email while you're here.
Do a little email.
If by chance you do, then what we need to do is check and see if we have anything in that good old email inbox, because it just might be something in there. Let's see what's happening tonight.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All right. This one is a few weeks old from Steve Holmes, per my Bad Weather Brewing pick of the week. A Kansas winery also made a wine called F5, which is also a really cool bottle. And now it's called Blackout. It's also making one called Dodging Tornadoes. And there's also a tornado beer from Massachusetts. So if you're looking for Christmas gifts still, you know where to find the best weather wine or beer now for the weather enthusiast.
Only on this show do you get this information, not all these other podcasts, only on this one right here.
There's one that probably covers that. I think.
This one from Jeremy Bauer. The 20th annual UNL Family Weather Fest is Saturday, April 4th, 2020 at the UNL Innovation Campus in Lincoln, Nebraska. This event is totally free to the public, includes storm spotter training in the afternoon. And I'm sure Jeremy will keep us updated with information in the coming months. Jeremy will also be presenting on April 7th at the Herald's Photo on West 41st Street in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Presentation will be the focus of some highlights in his 20 years of storm chasing. So some great news from our friend Jeremy Bauer and fellow storm chaser. This one just came in from Shamar Davis. Let's see. He and James, I'm talking about tonight, reignited my interest in meteorology as I started applying to colleges a few weeks ago. So that's pretty exciting. And there was something else I knew I had missed, but I am not finding it. So I'll see if I can find that other one. Email at weatherbrains.com if you have a great email for us.
Awesome. And again, we'll be doing another show in 24 hours, so get that in within 24 hours. You might hear it tomorrow. So let's take a quick break for Tony Rice and his astronomy report. We'll come back with the weather roundup, the picks of the week, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Around this time of year, offices tend to grow emptier and emptier. But that's not true of many professions. Hospitals, police and fire stations, and TV stations still bustle throughout Christmas and New Year's. The same is true of mission control and low Earth orbit. The Earth doesn't stop turning and launch opportunities won't wait. Back on December 16, 1965, astronauts Tom Stafford and Wally Schirra were on board Gemini 6, and they just made history, performing the first rendezvous between two spacecraft, a critical step in preparation for landing on the moon. Schirra cracked the mic, and it was time for another surprise first. He said, "Houston, Gemini 7, this is Gemini 6. And we have an object, it looks like a satellite going from north to south, probably in polar orbit. Very low, looks like it might be going to re-enter soon. Stand by, you might just let me try to pick up that thing." The crew of Gemini 6 had smuggled aboard a small harmonica and some jingle bells. They were about to perform the first song in space. That harmonica and the bells were donated to the Smithsonian in 1967, complete with the dental floss and Velcro that had been attached to keep them on the wall until they were needed. These instruments remain some of the most unique in the Smithsonian's collection. Elsewhere in the sky, the sun will stand still, or at least that's what the Latin translation of solstice indicates. The sun will reach the lowest midday point on Saturday. The solstice happens at exactly 11:19 p.m. Eastern, when the sun is directly over the Tropic of Capricorn, about 425 miles northwest of Easter Island. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
We are doing this show on December the 18th, 2019, and we got some of the regulars missing. I see Dr. John and Nate and Kevin are out tonight, but Aubrey, you're our Eastern correspondent, so pretty cold up there tonight, huh?
Yeah, it's a bit nippy tonight. We've got some pesky winds as that dry cold front, semi-dry cold front, with the exception of some snow squalls and the mountains. Still picking up some flurries and some kind of rogue snow showers, but I believe Dr. John had quite the ice storm event earlier in the week. We kind of had we've had a couple of very borderline mixed precip events, nothing too terrible just yet, but I know they had some much worse icing earlier. I can't even remember what day. Monday, Tuesday, I don't even know what day it was. Today's Wednesday, so it was earlier than today.
Yeah, runs together. And down here where we are in the deep south, we had a severe weather event Monday night. In my state, we had at least 9 tornadoes, and those are the ones confirmed by the National Weather Service so far. And it looks as though the count might be 34 tornadoes for the entire event throughout the southern states. And that's a pretty significant late season type event. And again, we had tragic loss of life. We had, and you hate to see that just a week or so before Christmas. But
and the lady from Louisiana, I believe they said that she was in a mobile home also when she lost her life.
Yep.
Yeah. So we really need to get back on that. That has become front of mind. And we've had this problem forever. This is nothing new. I say forever. It's in my lifetime. Loss of life that your chance of dying in a tornado is much higher in a mobile home. What can we do in the weather enterprise to fix this problem? I think there's some things out there that we're not doing that we can do, but we all have to work together. And it's a science problem. It's a social science problem. It's a challenge, but we'll talk about that later. So Troy, let's go west. Well, first off, let's see, Matt, I guess you're in Atlanta. You're kind of dealing with the same stuff we are down here. It's just cold and dry now.
Just cold and dry. Yeah, we had a little bit of frost on my car this morning. It was kind of surprising because winds are about 10 knots, usually the threshold for frost. But expecting calm winds tonight under the high, and we'll probably see lows here in the upper 20s.
Yep. All right. So let's shift west to Norman, Oklahoma. Kim, how's your weather tonight?
Pretty great. Very seasonal, honestly. As compared to northern Indiana, where I'm from, where it's pretty bitterly cold. I love winter in Oklahoma. Comparatively, we're going to be in the 50s, during the day, down to the 30s through a good part of this week, and that is for December. That is just not bad. It feels like, when I was growing up, that would have been like a nice April day. So we're hanging in there, just cool and dry, similar to you guys right now.
And Troy, how you doing down in Austin, Tejas?
Well, the big story here, as you can tell with my voice tonight, and all this dry air moved in following that system, James, that came your way, has been the introduction of cedar pollen, which has been so bad here. I went today or yesterday to get allergy shot, and to see people standing in lines just at the doctor's offices. Really, really, really bad down here. And what's really amazing is at the moment here in Austin, winds, we have dew points in the upper teens to around 20. And we saw it last night as well. But right now in the city of Austin, out at Austin Bergstrom International Airport, it's a low-lying location out toward Onion Creek. They're 28. At Austin Executive Airport, less than 13 miles away, it's 45.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And we're
not a
seeing
one
that
number,
across
not a
the
one
city.
number place, not a
Yeah,
one number forecast.
And by the way, another thing too was I believe it was Fairbanks a couple of days ago. They saw the same thing up in the foothills up around the university up there, where they saw temperatures. Of course, the coldest air was down at the airport, and you went up the hillside, the inversion was there. Now, I'm not saying the inversion is what you want to go, sunbathing in, but at the same time, it was a big difference there as well. This morning at Bergstrom International Airport in Austin, 23, that beat the old record for the 18th day of December. I think 25 back in 2003 was that record. So we've been breaking records. We had 18, 19 degrees around parts of the Austin suburban area this morning. So,
and it looks like, looking ahead to Christmas week, much of the central and eastern U.S. will be relatively mild.
Yeah. But given that, James, as we know this year, this weather has been schizophrenic this fall. And I'm telling you, I getting afraid of getting warmer around Christmas, wondering what's going to happen around New Year's. The bottom drops out. And so it's going to be interesting to see. But tonight here, winds are calm. I've got about 34, 35 degrees outside where I am right now. So really not bad. I'm kind of enjoying the cooler weather.
Yep. And again, for a lot of folks, no white Christmas next week, but a fairly mild Christmas if the pattern now we're seeing verifies here. All right. So we are coming up on 15 till the hour, and I've got to scoot here in a minute to get ready for the late news. But I want to start with picks of the week. And Kim, let's go to yours and let's talk about that issue for a second here.
Sure. I picked it when we hadn't gotten the chance to discuss it. I thought it needed to at least get a mention on the show. The Barry Myers, who had been the former nominee for administrator of NOAA, peeled out. He's having some health problems, I understand, so that left a vacancy. And the president nominated Neil Jacobs, who had been the acting administrator, and he's someone that some on our show are familiar with. He is a meteorologist and computer scientist, and a very well-reputed one at that. He's worked a great deal between all of the sectors of our field to develop our modeling capabilities in a cohesive way. There's been a lot of advances in many fronts, and a lot of it had been a little bit, disconnected, and his thing has really been to put it all together. And he's done a really great job while working in NOAA in the acting role, and then sort of assisting the acting administrator over the past year. And I'm excited to see the nomination go forward. So while, yes, it is a mixed politics news day, that is for the meteorological community, a very nice piece of news.
I think it's exciting. I think having Dr. Jacobs in that position is going to be a good thing for all of us here. And it's unfortunate. I've already seen him attacked by some political hacks tonight. And he got involved in the Trump Birmingham Weather Service office mess I was involved with. And there's some that will never support him because they believed, he was sided with the president. And look, I saw this guy at the NWA, and I had real compassion for him. The guy was in a no-win situation, but I think he's brilliant. I think he's a good leader. He understands our needs. So for me, it's a big thumbs up. And I saw Troy, it looks like you were giving a thumbs up too.
No, I think without getting the political stuff, James, I think there'd be people that would argue with it that the sun's coming up in the east in the morning. And, if you're going to argue about the fact the sun's coming up in the east in the morning, you can go straight. You
wait.
Yeah.
Easy.
I'm not really interested in hearing about it. If you're offended by these things, keep it to yourself. That's usually your problem, not mine.
So
there's not a perfect in the world that we live in. And working in these positions is very difficult. You have to have respect.
Matt, any thoughts from you concerning your position with Delta?
As far as the new nomination, you had me at he's a meteorologist.
Yep.
He understands us. And
yes.
I just think he's a great guy, and think he's brilliant. I've looked at the work that this man has done in modeling, and he understands where we are in this country, and the European GFS thing. I mean, I think he's interested in, we all win when everybody tries to get better. So I'm all for it. So again, if you'd like to read more about
the bottom line is, James, that the man didn't necessarily have to come to Huntsville, and
right.
he did. He came
Right.
in there and he addressed the crowd at National Weather Association meetings.
He had the guts to do that, and I thought it was just tremendous. So really, I've got to get dressed. My pick of the week, it's long form coverage we did Monday night. I welcome comments, criticism, critique. We do not get better unless we have constructive criticism. So it's on YouTube if you'd like to watch it, and if you have any thoughts, please drop in the comments section. Have the Troy, Kim, y'all got to take him here. I got to go get dressed.
Sounds
That's
good.
good.
We'll see y'all tomorrow night.
See you, James. See you tomorrow night. I don't really have now. I'm glad we got rid of James because he was going to pull the horn on me. I have no pick of the week.
I sent you one, Troy. Check your email.
No, it just I could start talking about my pick of the week. Okay. My pick of the week are all my students that worked hard this semester and earned an A. And I can't go into specifics or I go to prison. So, but at the same time, congratulations to all the students. And by the way, the meteorology students that watch us from around the country tonight. You've just finished your finals, and a lot of people have done a lot of good work, and that's my pick of the week.
There's a lot of jobs out there.
Yep.
That's wonderful. All right. Do we have picks for Aubrey? I don't know if we got your pick.
I've got a pick. So mine is actually an AccuWeather article. I know, but it talks about our fearless leader, James Spann. So what they did is they kind of went through some weather heroes over the last decade, since we are coming to a close of this decade. And they specifically said AccuWeather is revisiting some of the most extreme weather events of the last 10 years and highlighting the heroic people who carried out selfless acts during those disasters to help those in need. James Spann is one of those heroes. So, and it talks specifically about the 2011 event. So that's a really good article to read.
Very good. Well, that's a great pick. Thank you, Aubrey. Matt, did you happen to have a pick of the week for us?
Mine may be a little easy, but it's to all my brothers and sisters in arms who are not with their families over this Christmas season. Time to be together, and they're out defending the freedoms and liberties that we get to enjoy here in the United States, not just with awesome weather data, but also with a lot more. So my pick would be active duty and serving military.
Amen.
Amen. How wonderful. And what a wonderful note to close out the show. Thank you so much for rejoining us. It was great to hear from you again. And how wonderful. It sounds like there's so much that you could be doing. And you have such a fantastic grasp of the atmosphere, but a real credit to you and service to our country that you're doing what you're doing for all of us. So thank you for your service, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. I hope you guys all have a great night and see some of you in 24 hours.
Great.
Take care.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
Wow, I just walked back in here. It looks like they've wrapped up the show here. So goodness. All right. Thank you guys for watching tonight. And again, we've got another show tomorrow night for those that watched live. This is the show for this week, December 16th. And then the show we do tomorrow night is for Christmas week, because I'll be off next week. So we'll see you guys tomorrow night, same time, same channel. No, wait, take it back. Not the same time. We're going to be on it 8 Eastern, 7 Central. So it's going to be early tomorrow night. So we will see you guys then. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great night, and God bless. We'll see you all tomorrow.